That's one on there. The bright light on.
So those are some of the issues we're trying to overcome in addition to other things that we want to see happen. So on the west side, and again, it's sort of a simpler dynamic. It's all commercial, but you have other issues at play. So you have the fact that you are near downtown, and you are near Duquesne University, and you are near Duquesne University, and all of these things are driving employees to parking in the district. The other thing that is happening is that you have events. And so parking has become a really profitable thing. Because you're so near all these other areas, a lot of times property owners told us that they expect to be paid a lot of money for their property before it gets developed, because they can see around them big buildings. But in this district, we've kept the heights really low, so people aren't willing to pay them all that money because they can't build those tall buildings that are around there. So we've sort of created a market problem there by keeping the heights low, but everything around here has very tall heights and a lot of big buildings. People have an expectation for their property. And the result of some of this is that we don't have buildings, we don't have a lot of row houses, we don't have a lot of apartment buildings, we don't have a lot of activity, which means we don't have the shops that people want, that they remember from 50 years ago where it was a very active board. We just don't have the people to sustain that. So the big point of this district is to try to overcome some of these issues. And at a basic level, that's what we're trying to do with the sort of separation of the district. This is sort of the, this is actually in the code, so when you look at it, you'll see that these are the intention points of the code. They get at trying to allow more dense development, because we can see that allowing the, continuing the current pattern of zoning is not working. They get at some of what we heard a lot of was that affordable housing and building new affordable housing is really important to people, in addition to sort of other kinds of market rate housing and apartments that they would see. We've also heard that people want to see new development bring in innovative building design, things that are greener, that produce their own energy, that treat stormwater through green infrastructure so that they can be adding sort of open space features to the neighborhood. So the proposed zoning is very simple. On the west side of the district, it just makes one commercial district, mixed-use core. Residential would still be allowed. You would expect to see larger apartment buildings there if you see residential. And on the eastern side of the district, you see something called the residential core. And if you think about all of the different uses that were allowed on the individual zones on a very complicated map, we basically kept all of those, but merged them all into one zone. So there's a couple key points about this. One is it's a lot more flexible, and that's typically better for development. It allows developers to actually make things work that in this neighborhood they have not been able to make work. Okay. The other thing that's important to know is that we're not allowing taller buildings by right. So the building heights that are allowed today are the same ones in the future. What we are allowing buildings to be is taller if they do things, if they contribute things to the neighborhood. So when you see taller buildings, it's because they contributed something that came out of the goals of the plan. So that's, and we're getting back to, I'm going to sound like a little bit repetitious here, but that's the buildings that use a lot less energy, provide energy to the district, that are creating open space features through green infrastructure and treating their own stormwater, that create more affordable housing, or that reuse existing buildings or make new buildings that are consistent with the historic character that so many of you care about.
So, excuse me.
Yep.
What is the height now? It is 4 stories, you said?
It's actually regularly feet. So it's in the eastern side of the district, it's closer to like 45 feet.
Okay.
And then on the western side of the district, it's between 60 and 70 feet, depending on which of the two different kinds of commercial zones you're in. Okay. So that's what would be allowed by right.
So you would allow, like, UPMC to come in and build a structure, if it would be feasible or met all the criteria that you
It would allow-
require.
yeah,
It could
it
be
would allow
higher
them to
than
go.
65 feet?
If they can meet one of the community's goals, then they can build
Okay.
taller buildings. And I have more detail on that. This is
Okay.
Should we hold that information for, like, when you're done? Because there's a lot of questions on that.
There are a lot of questions on that, I understand that. And we actually have an entire table just to talk about that afterwards, so if people, I'm not going to squash any questions as you have them, but if you want to wait to the end, we can just have everyone come over here that wants to talk about that. We have a whole use table, we have a whole table just to look up your existing and your future zoning, and they can answer some of the basic questions.
I mean, there's quite a few of us. We had a meeting on the point rezoning and things with Scott. The neighbors that are here, I've been here 60 years, the neighbors that have been here, I don't want to see, like, we're in a row house and we have open space. I don't want to see someone coming in building a building like this on Fifth Avenue, those lots. Doesn't match the street, and I'm on Forbes.
Sure.
And so the blocks are so different where you can put those point systems in, but some places you don't want to put those point systems in.
Right. And in your area, the point systems would only allow them to get up to 70 feet. So it's not, so on the west side, we expect much taller buildings. On your side of the district, we've kept the building heights relatively low. So they currently could be 40, and it would allow out of 30 feet through doing some, all these sort of benefits that we've been talking about.
Okay.
So it's not the same thing across the whole district by any means.
Highest with the point system would be 70?
Yep, on your part of the district. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, go ahead.
Is the new zoning going to require builders to have like parking? Or are you going to decouple that from the?
We are going to decouple that, and I've got a whole parking section, so I'm not going to go much more into that right now.
If you have a multi-unit building with like 40 units in it, you're not going to have any.
They're not going to have 40 parking spaces, right?
So what are people going to do there if they have cars? Where are they going to park?
I'm just going to put a slight pin in that because I have like 3 slides that cover that in pretty good detail. We definitely will cover it. Just got to trust me that I already
Linda has a question as well.
Okay, Linda.
Just as a further point of clarification, if you look at the eastern part, the residential district, what you're proposing is that developers can come in and build to 75 feet,
70 feet.
70 feet instead of 45.
They got 45 today, yeah.
Okay, so by right, they can do this if they've done something in their building that might handle renewable energy or stormwater or that kind of thing. And by right, that means the community does not have a chance to actually review. The review would happen at the city, but the community would not really have a chance to review that project because they've done something in that top, in the community benefits, and they've chosen what their community benefits are, and they're providing them, and so automatically they can go to 75.
No, so it doesn't change the community review process at all.
But if it's by right.
It's by right, but you would still, this district would
So how
still,
does the community oppose?
so this district would still go
something that comes
through.
next to our buildings that are 3 stories and have been done with the real sort of history of the neighborhood
Sure.
in mind, and all of a sudden someone's coming in and can make a more profitable project
Right.
by going 7 stories, but it's really, I think we have to be so careful here because I don't think the community should give up the strike to review new projects that are coming in at a scale that is very different than currently
Yep.
exists.
And they're not. So I just want to be very clear to
It feels like
everyone.
they are.
Well,
Yes,
you
you keep saying that.
have to let
They're
Derek
not.
finish, because there is still a whole community review process that brings about.
Yeah. So the same community review process you've had for the last 2 years is staying in place. So you still have design review. You still have, Uptown Partners holds a design review committee where you can all come and review projects. And you still have planning commission that will ask, what kind of community involvement did you do? And expect a good answer, especially in this district. So all of those things that are in place today will stay in place. We did not go the path, and I know at early stages we floated this idea out there that maybe if you were able to meet these goals, you would basically you would sort of a pre-approved project. You're not going that direction, which I think is what you're talking about. which was an earlier concept. Instead, you keep all the same review process in place. So even though they might be getting 15 extra feet, you still have the same review, you still have the same opportunity to comment on that. That doesn't change.
And that's gonna be in writing, so.
It's already in the, I mean, it's in the
Oh,
code
the
currently,
code is now.
and the current proposal that you have is the same. Okay?
You can stop it if you, I mean,
There's
if you have
enough.
enough voices. I'm not gonna have a bar next to my house, that's for sure.
So the next thing I want to talk about, and I promise you we're going to get into parking, is what we're trying to do with the development standards. So this is, if you remember what I said about this is how we control a building to look like. And these are requirements, they're not guidance. So one of the things that we really want to do is improve the street environment on 5th and Forbes. And so what you're looking at there is a couple things. One is, and this gets at what happens when you go taller. So if you go, when a building gets up to 50 feet on the west side of the district or 40 feet on the east side of the district, it then has to sort of, we call it stepping back. But the mass has to push back, and it has to push back 10 feet. And I've got a picture that will show you what that looks like. It's hard to picture what that is. But the result is that on the street level, you won't see all that building that you normally see. It sort of creates more space for light and air to get back down to the street. And there are definitely parts of downtown where before we had these kinds of, tools, I guess, where you can see that you got a lot less light traveling through down the street level. So this is one thing that we're looking at here with taller buildings. The other thing that is sort of key is that we're expanding the sidewalk width. So we've heard throughout the city, but especially in uptown, that sidewalks need to be wider and there needs to be more space for people to travel on and not be taken up with other things that sort of block your access. And so this comes with a new standard there. The other thing that we've talked about many times even in this presentation, but certainly over the last 2 years, is that people are tired of seeing new surface parking lots show up on 5th and Forbes. There's a lot of surface parking lots today. And so we're talking about there is prohibiting new surface parking and structured parking along 5th and Forbes. So it would have to be hidden behind some other piece of structure that's active. And that gets to the last one, which is on the ground floor. We have had some projects, we had flats on 5th, for example, where you have parking on the ground floor level. And we hear from a lot of people that they would love to see that space used for something more active than an empty parking garage. And so there we're requiring active uses. We are being pretty flexible in what those active uses are, but they are specifically not parking. So and that's important to your experience if you think about walking through downtown, because on those blocks where there are active uses, you have a connection to what's going on, you feel safer, there's more light at night. There's a whole host of benefits that come with us requiring active uses on the ground floor, even if they are residential uses. So this is just sort of a diagram we've got over here if you want to come and look at it in more detail. What you're seeing here is a historic building, and this is in Toronto, this is not here. If you're like, I know that I saw people figuring out where that is, but it looks like this district. So what you've got is a historic building and then a new building here, and what you can see is that after the first 4 floors, the whole building mass steps back about 10 feet there, and then it goes up another 2 floors. And the result is that when you're here, you only see a 4-story building. It doesn't have the impression of a very tall building. The other thing that they've done very nicely here is that they've broken up what is a rather long building. In many ways, this is called articulation. So that it sort of steps and it feels like it's a multiple buildings cobbled together. So then the other thing that we talked about quite a bit tonight is the need to improve environmental performance of the buildings in this district, particularly around stormwater, where we have a lot of sewer overflow events. And so one of the things that we're doing through this, or proposing to do through this, is to reduce the thresholds for when our stormwater standards kick in. So we're bringing them down to 5,000 square feet. They were at 10,000. The other thing that we're doing, which is similar to other parts of the state actually, including Lancaster County, which is a very good program, is creating a very easy to use small project stormwater standard. And so you could take it basically comes down to a form, and you can fill it out yourself if you go in to do something that sort of creates more, sort of 500 to 5,000 square feet of impervious surface. So you're creating an area that stormwater can no longer go into, then you can fill out the standard and show how you're going to deal with it.
And Derek, to be clear, that's something that right now we don't require.
These are all, yeah.
That would be additional standards to control stormwater on these smaller projects that we don't currently require now. If someone were to try to build a building.
Yeah. The first standard I talked about, we're just lowering the threshold. It's the current standard.
There was a question there.
Yeah, I might be ahead of, but, it says free of cost, you're going to tear up the sidewalks. And currently, in the city, there's a lot of utilities. They just tore up the sidewalks and they did gas lines. Well, now a lot of the sidewalks they're gonna do water lines, right? And who's gonna pay for that? Or can they coordinate that to make that an issue? That when they tear up the sidewalk, they tear it up one time and inform the utilities.
So it's typically difficult. The benefit that we have in this district is that with the bus rapid transit project, we'll be doing a complete reconstruction of 5th and Forbes. And so what we're spending a lot of time thinking about right now is how to make sure that everything happens at once so that it's only, we don't want to dig it up more than once either. And so as we do that, there's a lot of things we want to put in there, and there's things that we have not had in the past. You want to put in infrastructure for data so that new businesses can grow in this district, which is a big part of the innovation part of our plan. You also want to put in district energy, so you've got this new energy facility, and we want people to connect to that. So there's an opportunity potentially to expand it on 5th and Forbes so that more people could connect. There's a lot of other things that we want to put in there, including stormwater management.
Well, yeah, see, that was one of the things. They did the gas line last year. I spent 6 months going down every Tuesday, make sure that they would, so I could put a pipe in for my drain to go to the street instead of having it dumped right on the sidewalk or into the basement, which what it would do. So I mean, I finally got it in, but it was only through me doing all the legwork and talking to the contractors and coming down every week to see when they were going to pour cement. You know, and to get ahead. So I would like to make sure that you guys have a plan that's going to work with the neighbors.
Yeah, so one of the things that's not related to zoning at all, but is an outcome of the planning process, is that we've created this thing called the Uptown Task Force. And there is an Oakland task force that is loosely modeled on, where it allows all of the stakeholder groups in the community to come together and have conversations. It also allows the city to provide information and other agencies, so we have all of the relevant agencies sitting on that panel. And so the goal is better coordination, because arguably you've had bad coordination in the past. The goal is that as we do these things, everyone knows about them well in advance, and they understand what's going on. So that, it's not really a zoning thing, but that's definitely something we're going to hit pretty hard on this.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that I hadn't talked about here, two things. So one is that we're offering up free advisory design, rebuilding design reviews for projects of a larger scale. So if they're 10,000 square feet in size, or if they are an expansion of 5,000 square feet. And the goal there is that as soon as we know about a project in the city, we'll have the Green Building Alliance come in and provide free assistance or free advice. And so buildings can learn both low cost and no cost things that they can do. And then we can also start to explain to them this new bonus system where a lot of it is around green building principles and practices. And so they can line up their projects to take advantage of those. The more that we can do that, the more that the community sees these goals embedded in development that happens here. Because I think ultimately it would be disappointing. It would be a good outcome, but it would be disappointing if all the new development didn't take advantage of any of those. Right? So we're trying to queue it up so that more development will take advantage of those bonuses. And the last thing is that the IPOD restrictions that Andrew talked about to limit demolition are remaining in place. So you do not, in this district, you won't be demolishing buildings without an approved plan for rebuilding. So let's talk about parking. Parking is always a hot topic.
Shake the rest of that.
It's not even last. So we are proposing to eliminate minimum parking requirements in this district. I've got another slide that's like, really? And I'll sort of walk through some of what's behind a lot of this. The other thing that we're proposing is to cap the amount of parking that you can create. If you think about the kind of parking that we see in the district, we see huge amounts of it in some places and then none of it in other places. What we're trying to do is make sure that new development distributes it more evenly than that, so you don't have huge parking garages somewhere and none somewhere else. The other thing is that when parking comes into the district, structured parking, we want to see it do some new things. So one of those is that all of the trends are telling us that there will be less need for parking in the future. We don't know how far in the future that is, but we know that increasingly people are using rideshare and driving less. And we're spending a lot of money on transit too to make it easier for people to go places without their car. It's not everyone, I can see a lot of head shaking, but it is a lot of people. And this is a trend.
It's not a lot of people. What you're saying is you're going after all the people who work here within the district and who maybe rent here, and you're going to make parking lots. It's everything for everyone else, the businesses, but the 200, I don't know how many we have now that own houses. You're not looking after us. You're not. I've been fighting constantly with my parking space.
It's a complicated topic. So one of the things is that the limit, sometimes it feels like there's not a lot of parking in this district, even though there are huge parking garages in this district. And
I
so,
don't see it.
and a lot of that is coming, like you're saying, is coming from employees, from downtown employees that aren't even in this district, and also from event visitors.
Well, yeah, we pay.
No, I'm saying, people who don't live in the neighborhood, they work, and then they leave, but they pick up parking spaces on the side streets and Ford Street. So even though there's permit parking, nobody enforces it.
There's permit parking in a part of the district. So one of the other proposals, and this is
And there's a
again,
reason for it, too.
this is more about the plan, but the plan proposes to control parking everywhere and to make it, and try to improve the efficiency of parking in the district so that parking on some streets is better utilized by retail businesses, so commercial businesses. And then we have better control over the residential parking. So that's a part of the plan too.
People still don't want to pay the park.
Yeah, so I mean, but parts
Well,
of the
the
district are
bottom line
uncontrolled.
is, I can't walk, like, she's on Van Bram, I'm on the 8th, I'm by Milton Burger. I can't walk with groceries and everything from, if they built a lot or a parking structure from Van Bram to my house. So that's a big problem.
Right.
But you want to take 10 feet in front of my house, and you want to put a bike lane in, and you want to do all the stuff that we don't need.
Well, and
I
Go ahead.
would propose that a well-structured development plan is going to give it back to you in equity. The presenter mentioned that there's the stormwater plans from Lancaster. I've owned property and operated a business there for the last 9 years. It works really, really well, these sorts of designs. I had a house go from 140 to 275 in 9 years because of this development.
It doesn't help if you want to stay in your house and you can't park in front of your house.
Exactly.
Well, you can afford to do
Your
more
house is
things with
It's
it.
worth more, but it still doesn't help you if you can't park in front of your house.
Right. I mean,
Who in the
you
city
do
can
care.
park in front of their house? I mean, they're city streets.
We've lived in.
We have to, he's talking about addressing additional parking enforcement and additional parking permit districts, push the people who park uptown and then walk downtown, so that we have more spaces within the neighborhood for people to live.
But
At a certain point, they're streets, and so we have to figure out just how to make it work for everyone in the neighborhood.
well, for 60 years, we've been, I'm just going to talk for 60 years or 62 years. That has been a street for 62 years. And we've parked on it for 62 years. But before you take something away after a long, long time, you have to figure out we're inconvenienced, where are we going to park?
Well, I don't understand
for
from
the
what's being
commercial.
presented, what's being taken away. I mean,
Right.
you'll still have parking.
Well,
in front of your house.
on our street, on our block, which is,
What street are you on? Yeah.
Forbes Avenue, 1700. And now you're putting 10 foot of walk space, 5 foot of bike space, then parking, which I have an issue with, and I've called the ADA, I think I wrote this real well, I do, but it's a worry to me because I don't think I'm gonna die within the next 10 years. So I want to make sure that I can get in and out of my house comfortably and also safely and not injure myself again. I mean, right now, I'm just going through everything from the waist down supposed to die. So it's like, you need to have some consideration for the older people who lives in the neighborhood. And I know it's hard. And I think that should be tough.
So, and I just want to make clear, so there is a
Sorry,
host, there are things that we can do with the zoning. There are also programs that we're working on, and that's where we're trying to improve the way that parking is utilized today, because it's not very efficiently used. And there are big gaps in where we regulate parking. Even where we do, there are big problems with enforcement. And those are all, we know those. We've got to improve on all those things. And it's working with the community members that helps us do that. So this is not like a done deal, and zoning is not going to fix or destroy the system. We've got to do that. We've got to make these things better ourselves. And it's not going to be done overnight. We are also allowing parking to be built. We're just controlling how it's built. So we're trying to get other benefits out of parking. And so we're not saying no to parking. What we're saying is parking, but X, Y, Z. And so what you're looking at here is as people build parking, and we do expect people to build parking, even if we don't require it because the banks require it, and their tenants may require it. And so what we've been doing currently is requiring so much parking that they're building twice as much as they actually use. And that's another problem that we have, is that instead of on 5th or Forbes, where you could have a shop or a store or a restaurant, you have a parking garage basically at your level. And then up above that, you have apartments or future condos or whatever else. So there's a lot of issues done back there. I totally understand it's complicated. The zoning is not going to fix them all, but we are working on all of them. We understand. And the other thing is, well, we obviously as a city, it's a public street. We cannot guarantee people parking in front of their house.
Then why can we guarantee the mayor bike lanes? When we have a bike trail that goes right through below our neighborhood. If he would just put in ramps to get people.
But I'm saying, right, so bike lanes are a different thing, right? Bike lanes is traffic on a street, and you're talking about parking that you want designated to you in front of your house.
Right, it's taking my parking space because it's moving me out into the.
So what I'm saying is today someone could park in my parking space, right?
I'm sorry?
Today anyone could park in your parking space.
Not really.
No.
But I might add that, the construction of bike lanes is part of a street project that is separate from what we're talking about tonight with the zoning. So I understand the concern, and I understand that there are, we've been having multiple conversations around multiple things, but, the bike lane and, and the zoning are two, separate, but as I understand, related things, for your concerns, so.
Is the new zoning going to change permit parking in any way?
The zoning doesn't, no.
Program here,
The zoning regulates private property and public use of property. It doesn't regulate the right of way in that way. So we can do things on the sidewalk, but it isn't replacing the permit parking zones or anything like that. It's a different program.
Excuse me, there are quite a few abandoned buildings in our town, particularly two right on my block.
Sure.
And one is very big, I don't know, that one apartment building, you sit in my garden and see. I think you said- Yeah, I don't know how many stories that is. Yeah. I mean, as far as the zoning, who owns that property? Is there any way that somebody could get these property owners or whoever owns? I don't even know, maybe the city owns it. I don't know.
Yeah.
You need one front.
Well, there's the one across the street from me, but that's just an empty house, has been abandoned for
Sure.
3-4 decades.
Yep.
And on Fifth Avenue, right next to, right across from Sam's Market,
I know
there's a
those are-
big,
Yep.
Yeah, we know who the owners are.
yeah, I mean,
So we can't fix that directly with zoning. What we can do is improve the flexibility of the zoning so that people, if someone wants to reuse that property, or if they want to do something else with that house besides use it as a house, maybe they want to use it as an office, then they can. It's very costly often to rehab these buildings, and so another use may be the way that they do it, especially if they've been left to sit for a long
they've
time.
been empty for decades.
Yeah.
Since-
It's going to be costly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just might, just out of interest in everybody's time, it's about 7:30 right now. We kind of gave on the notice to everybody till 8. So I just might request, if it's okay with everybody, that we kind of just finish the last little bit of the presentation and then announce the 3 stations, and then have it, so we have a chance to answer as many questions as possible and be able to get through everything, within the time that we scheduled. So is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
General agreement? Okay, great.
And I think we hit parking pretty well. I wanted to make sure that we got to talk about the performance point systems and the details. We've been talking about it as a way to get things in the district that we know from the community that they want through the planning process. But what does that really mean? So again, and I've said these a few times at this point, but these are sort of the things that we think private development can do if properly incented to do it. So by providing a little bit more height, or a lot more height in some cases, we can get more out of these buildings than just a building. So what could that look like? In the west side of the district, it could be a large building. I mean, there are many large buildings, all surrounding that part of the district, whether it's Chatham or any of the other tall towers around. But with that, what we'd like to see is stormwater management through really interesting and innovative ways. This project has both stormwater and it's super energy efficient. So this building is putting a lot less strain on the energy system. It may generate its own energy. It does a lot of things besides just sit there on the lot. And as you can sort of see with these awnings, there's active ground floor activity down there. There's shops and all sorts of things. I sort of touched on this earlier, but one of the things we're interested in doing is trying to get people to preserve existing buildings. And it's hard to do. They are expensive to rehab. I totally understand that. And the longer they've sat, the harder it is. But we're trying to provide incentives for people to do that. Some of it may be that they build on top of an existing building. I definitely had the experience in previous jobs where people told me that if they could just add even a penthouse to the top of a project, it would make it work. And so sometimes that little bit will make things happen. You never quite know. And the also with this is that they could be doing things on energy efficiency. There's also those they can apply. And then some details here. You can do, for any of these things that we talked about, there's sort of a small, medium, large. The more you do, the more points you get, so you get more height, basically. And each point, and we haven't really been that specific about it, but each point gets you 15 feet, basically. So each point, each thing that you do, and they're all quite difficult to do, they're not easy things, gets you another 15 feet, and then we cap all that height. So on the west side of the district, we're going to go a little, on the west side of the district, it would be capped at 180 feet. And it sounds like a lot considering that you're starting at 60 feet. It's still shorter than a lot of the buildings that are around that area. So there's quite a few tall buildings there. And because this area sort of sits in a depression too, it won't seem as tall. I have a rendering that shows what the whole district looks built out to that, so you can see. And we've got another copy here if you really get into the details, because on the screen it's not going to look great.
How many stories is 180 feet?
Well, we let that up to the designer, but it could be 17.
So would that include, like, if somebody said, I think at the last meeting, on roof parking or something, so we could have the stores on the street
Oh,
level?
yeah. That would allow for a lot of things that the current zoning does not allow for. So you could have a ground floor that's fully activated, you could have a grocery store in it. And then above that, you could have 2 floors of parking easily, and then you'd have still, 14 stories of residential or whatever above there. You could have a lot of different uses in there. And what you can see here is sort of, we also want to be flexible so that different projects can utilize this in ways that make it work for them, so that more projects are feasible, and we get more projects using these bonuses. So it's very flexible. It's designed to be sort of swapped and added up, and for different projects they have different needs, especially if a project is going in and wants to do affordable housing, they can get points for that, and we want to give them points for that to get more height. It will help their project become more feasible too.
Is there a cap on the height, did you say?
Yep, so on the west side of the district, it's 180 feet, 17 stories roughly. And on the east side of the district, it's 70 feet, which is roughly 6 stories. There are 6-story buildings in that area today too.
That's what they said.
So what does that look like? That looks like, and then you can see the heights again here, basically reiterated. But in the district, you don't. So we can see, and you can see some of these buildings in here, and we can show you in detail. It's not a dramatic change to the district. We're just filling in all the gaps with buildings that are more or less the same height as this